A shadowy figure standing alone in a dimly lit forest, the trees looming ominously around him. Simon was easy prey, limping, stuttering, always avoiding eye contact like he was afraid of his own shadow. We hated him for how pitiful he was, hated him even more because he dared to exist in our world. It was a joke at first, something to pass the time after one too many drinks. Just scare him a little, make him run, watch him trip over his own feet. But it spiraled, like things do when you've got cruelty running through your veins. He begged us to stop. I remember his voice, trembling as he stumbled through the trees, his breath coming in ragged gasps. We didn't stop, not until he fell. Hard. That sound, the crunch of bone hitting rock, the way his body just crumpled, limp and broken. I swear, for a moment, everything was silent except for the crackle of leaves underfoot. We just stood there, staring down at him, frozen in horror. His eyes, they were still open, still wide, but he wasn't seeing us anymore. We ran. We swore we'd never talk about it again, and we didn't. We let the silence swallow the memory. We moved on, or at least tried to. But Simon didn't. It started with Brianna. She drowned in her own pool, which was strange enough, but the scratches on her neck told a different story. It was like someone had held her under, someone who wasn't there. At her funeral, we didn't even have to say it. We knew. Then came Lila. She fell down the stairs, except her parents said they heard her laughing before she screamed. Laughing. The kind of laugh that makes your skin crawl, like something inside her snapped. They found her at the bottom, her neck twisted, her eyes wide and glassy, just like Simon's. Jess didn't last much longer. She drove off a cliff late one night. Witnesses said they saw a man standing by the edge, limping, just watching as her car went over. No one believed it, but we did. We knew. One by one, he came for them, and I watched, helpless, knowing my turn was next. I tried to run, to change, to hide. I dyed my hair, cut it short, dressed differently, even lost weight. I became a stranger to myself, thinking I could escape him. But there was one thing I couldn't change. The birthmark. A small, crescent-shaped scar just under my collarbone. Ugly. Stupid. I'd always hated it, but now it's the thing that will doom me. Because I know. Simon remembers. Emma was the last to go before me. She started seeing him everywhere, in the corners of mirrors, in the shadows of empty rooms. She called me, frantic, saying he was inside her house. The next day, her parents found her, twisted in her sheets, eyes bulging, her face frozen in a mask of terror. And now it's just me. I feel him, you know, in the walls, in the whispers that creep through my empty apartment at night. He's always there, just out of sight, just close enough to remind me that I can't escape. I try to stay awake, try to keep the lights on, but it doesn't matter. Every time I close my eyes, I feel his breath on the back of my neck. I hear that dragging limp, the sound of his twisted legs scraping across the floor. Last night, I woke up to laughter, not my own. His. He was standing at the foot of my bed, his face a pale, bloated echo of the boy we left behind. His eyes, empty, like they'd never seen light. He didn't say anything, didn't move. He just looked at me, his gaze sliding down to the birthmark on my chest, that cursed crescent shape that gives me away. And then he smiled. He's not here to kill me quickly like the others. No, that would be too easy. He wants me to suffer, to feel the weight of what we did pressing down on my chest, suffocating me day by day. He's going to torment me, just like we tormented him, until there's nothing left but the sound of my own screams. I can't run. I can't hide. He's always watching, always waiting. I know he'll never leave me. Not until I've paid for what we did, piece by piece. Every breath I take, every flicker of light in the corner of my eye, He's there, reminding me that it's not over. It will never be over. I can't escape. He's coming for me just like he came for the others. And when he does, I'll hear that limp dragging across the floor. I'll hear his voice whispering my name, and I'll know that this time there's nowhere left to run. Because Simon always gets the last laugh.
Second story.
Echoes of a call, a premonition unanswered. Hey everyone, I've been a lurker on Reddit for a while, and I've read quite a few of people's experiences on here, but I'm pretty new to posting, so please forgive any mistakes. This story happened a few years ago, but I'm still just as lost about it all now as I was then. Hopefully, someone out there will have some sort of explanation for me. I was at work on a late shift when I got a call from my next-door neighbor. I'll call him Ian for the purpose of this story. He was an older guy, probably nearing his 50s, and nice enough, although we only really spoke if we happened to be going in or out of our houses at the same time. Even then, it was mostly small talk, weather, the neighbor's flashy new car. Street gossip, you know? He never called me before. We had each other's numbers only for emergencies. So when I saw his name pop up on my screen, especially while I was at work, I instantly felt a pit in my stomach. I answered right away. Ian's a pretty big guy, used to work in construction, I believe. While he's not exactly Jason Momoa, I always saw him as someone you wouldn't want to mess with. So when I heard him blurt out, "Are you home?" in a jittery, panicked voice, my worries spiked. I told him I was at work, and after making me clarify multiple times that no one was home, I heard Ian breathe out a huge sigh. Then he told me something that made my heart stop. "There are 2 men dressed in black outside your house," he said. "They're carrying knives, big ones, machetes maybe, and they're trying to get in." I asked if he had called the police, and he said no, not yet. He wanted to make sure no one was inside. He even said that if there had been anyone home, he'd have gone out there to deal with it himself, instead of waiting for the police to arrive. I thanked him for letting me know, told him I was going to call the police immediately, and made sure he had his doors locked. Ian reassured me that everything was locked, and he had a crowbar and a saw ready, just in case things got serious. I hung up and dialed 999. The police arrived quickly, just as the men were breaking in through one of my windows. They arrested both of them. One was my ex. Yeah, psycho, tied up in a lot of dodgy stuff. And the other was his equally shady friend. They had planned to wait for me to come home, although they didn't say what they intended to do once I got there. But then, things got weird. The next day, I went over to Ian's house. He's a whiskey man, so I picked up a bottle for him as a thank you. When he opened the door, though, he frowned slightly, looking at me as if I'd said something strange. But he invited me in, and we sat down in his living room. I thanked him again for the call and explained what the police had told me about my ex and his friend. Ian just kept staring at me, almost like I was crazy. I was still jittery from everything that had happened, so I nervously rambled on about how grateful I was. That's when he cut me off and asked me if I was feeling okay. I assured him I was fine, just shaken up. But then Ian shook his head. "That's not what I mean," he said softly. "I never called you." I blinked at him, utterly confused. Of course he'd called me. How else would I have known about the men outside my house? But Ian swore up and down that he hadn't called. He even pulled out his phone to show me his call history. My name wasn't there. I didn't believe him. I showed him my phone, expecting to see his number in my incoming calls, but it wasn't there either. Only my call to the police and a call to my dad from the day before. Ian wasn't listed anywhere. I was floored. How could I have known to call the police? Ian, seeing my disbelief, offered to show me footage from his Ring camera. I agreed, thinking this would clear things up. But when we watched the footage, Nothing made sense. The video showed Ian going outside to take out the trash. Then, moments after he went back inside, the two men appeared and headed straight for my house. Less than a minute later, the police cars showed up. No time for a phone call, no time for anything. It was impossible. The timeline didn't add up. I had called the police at 6:23 p.m., but Ian didn't even go outside until 6:29, long after the men had arrived. It defied all logic. I sat there trying to wrap my mind around it. How could I have known what was happening before it even happened? I'm not psychic, but Ian had no answers, and after some awkward silence, I found myself trying to convince him not to call an ambulance for me. It's been years, and I still don't have an explanation. I've scoured the internet, looking for anything that could make sense of it all, but all I find are stories about premonitions and warped timelines, and I'm still not sure what to believe. These detailed descriptions add depth to the key moments of the story, highlighting the suspense, confusion, and eerie atmosphere that builds throughout the narrator's experience.
And that's it for tonight's story. But don't worry. The darkness always has more tales to tell. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chilling episode. I've got something really special planned for next time. And trust me, you won't want to face it alone. So, stay tuned. And until then, keep your lights on and your doors locked.